Welcome back to iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Now, in the PropTech hot seat today is PJ Appleton, co-founder of Bloxspring. And Bloxspring is a strategic public relations firm serving companies across the built environment with a particular focus on the PropTech sector. PJ, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, always great to be here, Carol. Great to chat. Thanks for having me back on.
I'm delighted because we are your company and our company. We're in touch quite a lot. You have some really exciting prop tech companies on your books, as I like to think we do too. But I know that you're working for some of the prop tech companies who are really making an impact in the market at the moment. And so I know that any of them starting up in the UK and maybe hitting the UK as their first point of contact outside of their founding countries. I know Bloxspring is the place to go. So I'm delighted to have you on the show today so we can really talk about the ecosystem because yourself and your business partner, Adam, who isn't with us today, I met you first when you were both working for a leading prop tech company. So that's how I met you guys. And I think was it back in 2018 you went out on your own?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yes, we obviously met you 4 years ago. I remember I turned up late to one of your radio shows once, and you almost.
Did I give out to you? I get a bit strict about things like that.
I think I sent you some flowers afterwards to say sorry, but
good man, that always works.
Water under the bridge now. But yeah, no. So we obviously met back when Adam and I were at Equium, but. In 2020, Adam and I kind of saw this opportunity to try something a little bit different and set up, our consultancy, which was Bloxspring. And really, that was a result of kind of seeing this gap in the market around helping prop techs with their messaging, with their sales, and we decided to go for it in the first lockdown. By that point, it was kind of too late to go back, and so for the first half of 2020, it was pretty kind of hard going, but. Yeah, now we are a team of 10 and with around 16 clients across the UK, the USA and Europe as well. So it's been a really exciting couple of years for us.
Fantastic. That's amazing growth to be up to 10 in that length of time. So that's amazing. And I know you don't want to name drop, but can I name drop a few of your clients because they're well-known brands. So I know you work with HQO, right. Navigator, CRE, they're a really exciting one. One that I'm particularly keen on is Ility. So I know we've interviewed some of the management team from there, and I think that they're a great example of innovation coming from within the industry. So that's an exciting one, and I know there's Proda and so many more. Look, we might touch on some of those today, but really what I wanted to talk to you about today, really to see how can we add value to PropTech startups across the ecosystem today, no matter what geography, or what jurisdiction they're operating in, but also to make it, I suppose, a little more accessible for buyers of PropTech, because I think there's still a lot of confusion out there. And from the time maybe back in 2015 and 16, when we started going out and approaching traditional real estate operators about maybe trying technology or even meeting startups with a view to giving good feedback on proposed products, there was a little bit of reticence. Now that's completely changed over the last number of years with COVID. But how are you finding the marketplace for your innovators at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Honestly, I feel the whole ecosystem, the whole sort of prop tech space has changed so much since those early days. I'm sure you feel the same. I mean, even just the sort of the term, prop tech was seen as this super separate thing, this kind of this sort of new entrant to the market. Some people really loved that, thought, the industry needs shaking up. Some people were, I think, quite threatened by that, the kind of traditional sort of old guard of real estate. And I think there's been a massive change in the sense that, many of the firms we work with now don't describe themselves even as prop tech firms. They just sort of see themselves as a natural extension of the real estate industry, and kind of rightly so, because every other industry has been disrupted by technology. And so, real estate, really, technology should just be a kind of a part of it, in that sense. So, we've seen big change. And I think, buyers are now understanding that you do really need to need to adapt, and actually technology is not here to kind of threaten your business or your jobs. It's here to kind of help you be, drive efficiency. It's here to help generate better kind of ROI, solve all kinds of different problems. I think probably there's still certainly a way to go. I think the way that prop tech can really help itself is by really kind of proving ROI. So I think right at the start, there's a lot of sort of visionary statements from various kind of tech firms. We can do this, we can do this, we can do this. Real estate, ultimately, they're going to be looking at, can I see some case studies? Can I see some proof, some evidence that this stuff actually helps my business? And I think, that probably the pressure is still on prop tech to kind of prove the kind of the results. And I think if they do that, then I think the rest of the real estate market will kind of follow suit. But there's still certainly a kind of a way to go. I think the issue as well is that it's obviously still real estate is a traditional industry. It's still a very kind of relational industry, and there's lots of great skills within real estate. But technology traditionally hasn't been one of those. And so kind of almost as a whole industry, everybody's kind of upskilling together and learning, what it means to kind of implement technology, what it means to measure the success of technology, what it means to integrate with other technologies, all these kind of new terms that are suddenly coming to the fore in 2018. And I think that's happening, but obviously it takes a bit of time.
Yeah, it's, one thing that you touched on there is maybe a point of frustration that we've had, that actually what we're seeing now is take up of the technologies that we might have been talking about really years ago, as in
Mm,
back in 2016, 2017. And yet they're being adopted now. And so there's a feeling that the conversation hasn't moved on, but it has. The prop tech integration has moved on very well, but it feels like we're still tackling a lot of the same problems with the same technology. So there can be that feeling of stagnation, but actually
mm,
the difference is, I suppose, back in 2016, 2017, this was unproven technologies in some cases, whereas now not only is it proven, but now it's becoming core to achieving ESG metrics. Um, I interviewed our mutual friend and colleague Anthony Slumbers recently, and he really put it very succinctly. He said that previously the conversation around the take up of prop tech has moved on. That
mm,
actually he made the point that sustainability is the mechanism by which prop tech will be essentially integrated into real estate, and that is good, but it's also frustrating for everybody who was plugging away kind of in the decade before that. But listen, whatever driver works, we
mm.
know that it is working. But in the same week, Matt Knight published a piece. You might have seen it there, saying he called it. He thinks that prop tech as a sector is officially in recession.
Mm.
What do you make of that, PJ?
Yeah, it's a punchy statement. I mean, I guess I got two views on this. I think there are so many kind of external drivers that are providing amazing opportunities for tech firms serving the built environment. So obviously ESG is one of those, and I think the crazy thing about ESG as well is that you know generally speaking, when people mention ESG, they just mean the E bit, right? I mean, so many people think, oh, Paris Climate Agreement, we've got these targets that we have to meet. Let's think about the E. But even if you just take that bit, and plant the E aside for a second, the S and the G is still massively important as well. So suddenly our awareness of things like well-being in the workplace, that's a huge opportunity for prop techs as well. G as well on the kind of governance side of things. So the opportunities even in ESG alone are threefold. It's not just kind of one thing. But then you also kind of look at at hybrid working, obviously kind of post-COVID and the new requirements from that. There are just so many kind of new cultural changes that are taking place, and this is what I find fascinating about prop tech, is it's because it's trying to help real estate adapt to what's happening in the wider world. That okay, the sector is probably going through some consolidation. I would agree with that, because I think some firms that are maybe not able to kind of prove their value will be found out, and there inevitably is going to be a little bit of consolidation, whether it's M&A or just companies not quite making it and falling away. But consolidation is different to recession or regression. I think there's still, as a sector, there's still so many opportunities for prop tech to really help kind of real estate catapult into well, we are in the 21st century, have been for a while, but real estate still needs to get there. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I think that's a fair point, that maybe some prop techs have been floating through on the basis of the potential of what they could do, on the
Mm,
basis of their concept, and maybe when it came time to deliver in the marketplace, it's really when margins are strained, when there's pressure put on the financial side, that actually this is where we start to see these things crack. I'm not sure who was it that said, but it's only when the tide goes out that you realize who's been swimming naked. And there's a huge amount of that.
a great phrase.
No, but there's a huge amount of that. But on the other side of it, and I know we're still waiting kind of on the latest figures, but we know that, say, private equity in prop tech firms, we know last year that was up about 37 or
Mm,
35% or something like that.
mhm, mhm,
And I don't think that was coming off a low base. And we know that the vast majority of that, I think somewhere around 69 or 70%, is still going into prop tech funds that are doing maybe the prop tech that we were pushing years and years ago, like
mm,
the
mm,
sales and marketing and the
mhm.
construction management, the efficiencies, those
Yeah.
kind of things. So actually, we haven't even scratched the surface of the the different ESG solutions.
Mm,
But you talked about how the ESG, maybe the E is getting a little more prominence than the S and the G. Only in the last month or two, I moderated a panel for Biz Now in Dublin, and it was about ESG.
mm,
And like you, I believe that there's huge value to be gained by kind of particularly the S, the social side of it.
mm.
And I obviously made that point a bit too often on the panel, across the panel, because when came time for the Q&A, I had said, like, we're going to talk about more than just the E in ESG. And
Yeah.
by the time we got to the Q&A, someone said, okay, now can we talk about the E in ESG? So I think I may have overcorrected. And look, what that showed me was that I've lost my touch at reading the room, but also what that showed me is that actually the industry was there to understand how they can comply with their
Mm,
environmental and
mm,
sustainability
mhm,
metrics, because
mhm,
actually the social is a little bit still in the nice to have box,
mm, mm,
but the environmental is the one that actually there's pressure being put on them to report, there's pressure being put on them to
mm.
implement changes. So
Yeah.
actually that is probably where we're going to see the most market traction. Whether that's reflected in VC funding is a different question.
I mean, I think on that, what's interesting is on that E side of things, is that investors are now kind of putting pressure on landlords, on asset managers to to reach these targets. So when the money starts talking and starts focusing on something, then the rest of the industry is kind of like, okay, well, that's going to actually have an impact on us if we can't secure investment. I think on the S side, there's probably still not a totally concrete link between kind of well-being and your bottom line. So and I don't think that's right. I want to think that we've got sort of a better moral compass than that. Um, but I think certainly that probably will change, because actually I think certainly with hybrid working, or as Gen Z and millennials generally have a better understanding of their kind of their mental health. They're more open to talking about it. So actually, if they're suffering in that sense, people are losing their employees. If you're an occupier and you're losing your best employees because of these issues, then actually you are going to move on from that building, and that again does have an impact on the bottom line. It's just a bit harder to it's just a bit more kind of working out that you've got to do in order to kind of prove that there's a financial impact of the S side. But I think it's
But
still
is
important.
that is that the job then of the, not just startups, but the PropTech innovators in the marketplace? Anybody coming into a marketplace has to show their value. They really have to
Mm.
make a case for them being there. So do you think maybe is that something that PropTechs do well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think yes and no. The best ones, absolutely. I mean, I think about so many of our clients, and I'll just give one example, which is Coyote Software. I mean, those guys really came out of were born out of the last recession. Back in 2008. And they were real estate guys looking at, well, how can they use technology? It's like the market was so hard to understand, so hard to navigate. How could they use technology to better understand the opportunities available to them? Perfect example of a real estate problem, and then somebody kind of saying, well, let's look at how technology can help us. So it was a real direct link between the problem and the solution. And that's what makes a really good prop tech company fundamentally, is, are you solving an actual pain point, an actual problem? We always talk about Bloxspring, these companies have to be have to be aspirins. They've got to solve a headache. They can't just be kind of vitamins that are sort of nice to have supplement that adds a little bit of extra health, but you don't really need. So, I think the best companies are those ones that are really obviously linked to a problem. I think the technologies that struggle are where they're either trying to solve, in a sense, too many problems and haven't quite sort of nailed any one of them, or they're just kind of looking for a problem that doesn't quite exist. That's a classic problem with any startup, isn't it? But if you're not sort of directly tied into that sort of almost that emotional feel that the buyer has, which is, oh man, yeah, that thing is really stressful, or we really do want that thing to be solved, then you've got a problem, because either you've got to get some incredible marketing behind you to try and sort of sell something, but more often than not, I think you kind of get found out if you're not actually solving something that the industry needs.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. A couple of years ago, we talked about innovation. We were seeing, particularly on, say, the residential side, it was very
Mm,
much consumer led. So consumers having a problem personally, and then designing a solution, assuming everybody else had the same problem, but actually being dependent on the industry to roll out this problem, and then being surprised when the industry didn't engage.
mm,
And there was a huge cohort of startups in that space back in 2015, 2016. Whereas actually what we're seeing at the moment, the industry has stepped up in a way. So actually some of the best innovations we're seeing at the moment are coming from people who have a background in the industry.
yeah, yeah,
So there seems to be maybe a different, in terms of identifying a problem, there are always problems.
yes, yeah,
So it's not a case of even people having to invent problems, but maybe it's a case of people coming across a problem but not understanding that actually this isn't a priority. So it's not
mm,
one that's going to be resourced.
yeah,
Whereas innovation that's industry led tends to know where the pain points are that the industry is willing to pay for, given the margins that are there at the
mm,
moment. And that's
yeah,
not every problem. That's
yeah.
only certain problems. So in terms of the innovation that's coming out at the moment, do you think the industry is is acknowledging the problems that that technology is here to serve? Are you seeing still um, the industry was certainly in denial about technology right up until COVID? So as in the people who were doing it well, um, but the others, there was a huge gap between those who were adopting it and those who weren't. Whereas
Mm,
now data is everything.
mm.
So is this even a hard sell anymore?
It's funny because it still is, and it shouldn't be. Um, I think about some of the kind of data companies that we're working with. You look at the market right now, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. Property investors sitting on their hands a little bit. No one's quite sure where it's going to go. It's understandable. It's sort of turbulent times from a kind of macroeconomic point of view. And at that point, certainly if it's me, I'm thinking, well, I just need to get my hand on as much information, live information, as I possibly can in order to try and understand what's happening in the market. Obviously the answer to that, in my opinion at least, is to have as much data as you can, software that can collate market data, that can help sort of visualize that, provide me with really clear insights as to, okay, great, this looks like an amazing region to invest in, or okay, Dublin's blowing up right now, we really need to kind of invest there, or let's get out of London, whatever. But actually having that sort of those insights to hand, to me, makes most sense when the market's turbulent. However, I think I'm probably a bit harsher on the real estate industry, and actually I forget that to some extent it has it has always kind of relied on sort of relationships, so people kind of discussing the problems and actually kind of having some trusted advisors around them. And so I think a lot of people still go down that route and sort of say, oh, we need to talk to this guy, he's a really clear understanding of the market, or this lady has a really clear understanding of that market. So I think that's that's certainly been how the kind of the industry has worked for hundreds of years. So I think suddenly now data makes most sense to me, but it's still not somebody kind of reassuring you, is it, face to face? And I think probably a challenge for prop techs, and I think some that do this really well, is also kind of providing that sort of human plus technology service, which is, let me help you understand this technology, this software, let me help you sort of be the human sort of trust behind it as well. So it's fascinating because, where do you go when the market's turbulent? Do you go to kind of cold hard numbers? Do you go to somebody who you've just trusted for years and years and years? I think, many people would still go for the latter.
I'm really glad that you brought it around to the area of trust, because actually that's one of the things we're seeing in the marketplace is one of the biggest buying factors. So actually, because um, the move to technology is not completely new, the real estate industry, to be fair, across residential and commercial, they've been using technology for 20 plus years. So that's, it's not that it's completely new, but how we're asking them to use it, how they're expected to extract value, that has changed. But one thing we've seen actually in the marketplace is that companies are far more likely to trust a previous provider. So actually we have providers who were doing one thing being asked to provide something else, to design a solution to a different problem, rather than the same buyer going out to establish people in the marketplace just because they don't know them. So
Yeah.
actually, I think with technology, the trust factor is absolutely huge. And the reality is, I do think that over the last number of years, the value of data is being much better understood by the industry. But the problem is now there are so many prop tech companies or data real estate data companies offering this, that actually how can one innovator separate themselves from the crowd? How do you help your startups and your innovators to essentially step out and say, okay, we're all data collection companies, but here is what we do that's unique.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll go back to the first one first, which I think is just touching on that idea of trust and credibility. Personally, I think that is, yeah, as I say, that's certainly still a massive thing, isn't it? Some of the work that we do around, helping companies to show that they've helped another company, or to sort of say these people have invested in us. That goes a long way. Just think about Proda. We did a sort of Series A announcement recently, and they've had some amazing investors behind them, and actually already had so much interest off the back of that, because we don't like to be guinea pigs, do we? No one does. So actually knowing that somebody else has already had value from this product is great, and that makes a lot of sense. I think in terms of helping people kind of stand out, yeah, there are certainly a lot of data providers in the market, but they are all very different. I mean, and you only really kind of appreciate that when you sort of drill down into the actual solution. I think the issue for each of those is trying to get that face time with the buyer to demonstrate the point of difference, because there really are. It's not just the way that the data is collated, the different third-party sources they can draw in. It's the expertise behind that. It's the onboarding. It's the customer service. It's the the different data points. It's things like, are they providing information now on ESG? Everyone's asking for that. How do I know that this building is sustainable? So there are lots of different points of difference. I think for us, Bloxspring, the big challenge is always helping companies really define their messaging up front. It's a big part of what we do. We always sit down with them, and some companies will just say to us, we just want to get some press, and we say, well, look, let's work out, let's go right back to basics. Let's work out, who are you? What are you actually offering to your buyers? And then let's think about how can we communicate that, and then through which channels. And so it can be a bit of a painful process, but I think unless you're kind of really clearly articulating your particular value to the market, it's very hard to cut through against other companies. And that's something that we help with. That's my only plug for today, Carol, I promise.
No, genuinely, I think that this is really useful. And, I wholeheartedly agree with you about the value of, I think actually one of the things that technology startups lack is the objectiveness. Sometimes you need the hands or the arm's length distance to be, that little bit of perspective to be able to simplify what's complex. And to be honest, if it's good technology, then yes, it should be simple. But actually, when you get down to it, there's complexities involved. So actually, the messaging is all about making that simple, so that you're really making the buying decision easy, as opposed to putting more hurdles. But because we're talking about maybe spaces that are becoming ever more crowded, so particularly across commercial real estate and data collection. There was an article in Shifted recently that caught my attention, and I'd love to get your view on it. But let me ask first, in the context of startups and innovators who are well established scaling companies, whether they've gone through series of fundraising or not, how important is the profile of the founder or founders?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it's, certainly people, again, the real estate industry is based on relationships. So I think we actually see the value of knowing who's leading that company. It can be really, really important. We're often trying to encourage the CEOs that we work with to, like, just think about your own kind of personal LinkedIn profile. People are kind of interested, well, they are interested in what you have to say, and they might be actually looking at, what's important to you. So having a bit of personality behind the company, it can be really difficult. CEOs are busy, so that's often something we also help them with as well. Is like, can we help you kind of identify certain topics that might be good to talk about? So I think, having personality is huge. That said, I think one thing that's really exciting us, with the companies we're thinking about, is just having a sort of a diverse range of voices within the company. I think, again, this is a great opportunity for prop tech. We all know that real estate has traditionally struggled in terms of kind of promoting diversity. I think the opportunity for prop tech has always been, attracting a sort of a younger, more diverse demographic, who study those sort of STEM subjects, and promoting diversity within the real estate industry and being a real champion for that. So what we're excited about is, yes, helping CEOs tell their story, and what's exciting is there are increasingly more diverse CEOs, but it's also helping other people within the industry. There's heads of customer success, CFOs, CTOs, and just kind of really celebrating the whole kind of breadth of voices within the prop tech industry. There's certainly a big way to go. We're nowhere near kind of where I would love to see the industry at, but it's certainly kind of on its way, which is encouraging.
Yeah, well, PJ, thank you for that, and I agree with you about diversity. This isn't an industry that has done that well, particularly in Ireland, and I'd like to say that we are making progress. But actually, through PropTech Ireland, we were contacted last year to ask if we could put forward underrepresented founders. And what we realized then was that there was a special grant being made available for underrepresented founders. And as we looked through our cohort of Proptech Startups, we realized that we had more founders called Gareth than we had female founders. That's a problem. So we are utterly lacking diversity, not just across the PropTech, but construction technology as well. And to be honest, the problem is worse now than when I started doing this type of work in 2015 or 2016. That's very worrying to me. We have a handful of female founders, and that's only one factor of diversity in terms of neurodiversity, in terms of other cultures and ethnicities. We're just lacking completely. Excuse me. But so that's definitely a challenge that we have in Ireland. I don't know how that's mirrored outside of Ireland. But the reason I was asking about the founder's profile is because we have always been told, and it certainly seemed to be the case, that VCs were more attracted to established or proven founders and those who had a profile. And so I was really surprised in the last week to see a piece by a VC in Shifted, and I'll read it directly. It's founders, stop chasing the limelight, just build your damn product. So fame-seeking founders are not just annoying, they're potentially damaging to Europe's startup ecosystem. Now, honestly, I was raging when I read this, because founders have been told to go out and build a profile for themselves for the past decade or more. VCs have only just started doing this. And here was a VC whose name I had never heard before, taking the limelight in Shifted, which is one of the main now startup news outlets, to tell founders not to do it. It's the height of cynicism and hypocrisy, but it's also untrue. So I have to get your opinion on that. I mean, do you think, you're helping your clients go through funding rounds, you're dealing with VCs all the time. Is this thinking from VCs, or is this one VC chasing the limelight?
Oh, do you know what? That's a good question. I mean, I think, certainly when we're talking to our clients about fundraising, we do believe that, a bit of press and external credibility does go a long way. Does that have to be for the leader of the company, for the CEO? I don't think so. I think it can be the company as a whole. But I think if you're going out to VCs, what's the first thing they're probably going to do? They're going to Google you. So yeah, they'll go on your website, but after that, what are they looking at? And if they've seen there's nothing there, and they think these guys are maybe chancing it or whatever, then that's going to be a hard sell. If they look at what you've got going on, and it's just, oh, they've had some thought leadership in this, they're kind of they've put an announcement out here, then actually you're kind of showing that you're almost part of the kind of the real estate ecosystem, and you're clearly tied in. And so there is a little bit of kind of just immediate credibility that comes with that. And so we kind of are helping our companies gear up for fundraising rounds by actually putting out a bit of press that they can go into those meetings kind of saying, well, look, we're here and we're established. So that does help. I think gosh, on the whole, like kind of personal profiling with VCs, I mean, obviously it helps if you've had a previous success at another company. Say you've successfully kind of exited from a company, and you bring with you that kind of personal credibility, then great. That does strike me as slightly ironic. I do feel like VCs do make a good amount of noise themselves, so I don't want to get in trouble, but that strikes me as maybe a little bit ironic.
Well, look, to be honest, VCs seeking publicity like this is new. 10 years ago, you wouldn't know who a VC was. And even if there's a website, it will be a single page with, if you're lucky, an email address, but not always.
Yep.
So actually, this whole wave of VC seeking publicity is new, and in a way, it's almost to make themselves attractive for
absolutely
startup founders, because certainly there's startup founders who can access finance, generally have their choice of partners for that. So I just thought that was a really interesting one. I wanted to hear your take on that. But one thing that we seem to be coming back to quite a bit today is this whole notion of social proof. So actually, whether it's in the business side that people want to, on the buyer side, that they want to know that you have successfully implemented technology, or if it's on the funding side, they want to know it's, we're coming back to social proof. And that's, I mean, look, to be perfectly honest, that's why companies engage PR firms. So, but I know you mentioned there that actually it is possible to do this for the company rather than the founder, but in practice, from one PR to another, in practice, when you go to pitch a company, what's the question? They either want to know the clients or they want to know the founders, because it always comes back to a human story. So
it does,
I don't know, and I'd love to hear your take on this, but I could not promote an innovator, a new startup technology company through PR, not editorial or advertorial, but through PR, without pushing a human front and center.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting with the sort of startups that we've encountered. Personality goes a long way, and look, it's great if you got a CEO who's willing to, particularly with if you're sort of a small company, you're sort of unknown. How are you going to cut through the noise? We often say, well, take a contrarian stance on something, be passionate about something, because that's going to help you stand out. But I do still think the story and that human story can still come from the kind of the problem that you're solving. Now, often that's tied to the CEO. I'll give you an example of one of the companies we were working with early on, Checkboard. James Owusu, who was solving a problem that he'd actually encountered. So the whole company narrative was also tied in with him as well. Like the two things were really, really linked. But I think, take Coyote Software as an example. They've just got an amazing narrative anyway, because they came out of, really, they're born out of the last recession. Now, yes, the CEO was part of that journey, but actually just the very kind of like essence of why they were born was tied in with kind of, the downturn, coming out of that, how would real estate survive? And I still think that is almost still a human story. It's just that, you don't need to have the CEO involved in that. So, but I think this probably comes back to a wider point about storytelling and narrative generally, doesn't it? Because I think if you're just expecting to kind of have your solution and people will just come and find you, that's just not going to happen. And so actually being able to kind of really emotionally engage your buyer is huge. It's absolutely huge. If you can talk the same language that they're talking, you can sympathize with the problems they're experiencing, you can kind of communicate how you can solve those problems. and you can kind of have, build that sort of relationship with them. That's huge. Humans are still relational. So, that's the challenge that we always have with our companies, is how can we help you kind of tell that narrative in a really kind of impactful, powerful way, rather than just kind of sitting there and hoping that people will come to your website and find you. That's not really how it works.
I don't think that's how it works for any industry. Unfortunately, life
No.
would be much easier if it did. I'm conscious of time, but before we finish up today, I'm interested to see. We've talked about maybe where there's quite a number of innovators offering products across the real estate ecosystem, well, from construction and across the built environment. Are you seeing any challenges that are going unmet or unaddressed? Like, where do you see there's opportunities for new innovation?
Gosh, that's a great question. I mean, I think, in my opinion, the opportunities are still certainly around kind of not just being a point solution. So I think probably the opportunity is to be a tech firm that is that's able to kind of partner well, tie in with other technologies. So this is a big difference actually between even when we first spoke, back in 2018. There are a lot of kind of standalone technology companies that are solving one particular point solution. Now that's great, they're solving that problem, but you can't go into a building or a portfolio unaware that there are other technologies that you kind of need to tie in, and kind of talk to. So I think the big opportunity is still, how do we tie these things together? How do you kind of almost create a sort of almost a hub, a tech hub? I think, again, a company that's pretty cool on that is Ility. I know you spoke to them, but about how you can kind of you almost kind of drag and drop technologies, help them speak to each other, how you kind of package those up and shift them across your building. So I think that's still a big opportunity. The stuff we've obviously been talking about before. So what are the big issues facing the world? I mean, real estate still, contributes whatever 30% of CO2 emissions. That is still incredible, and we're supposed to kind of have got to net zero by 2050. That's, the clock is ticking down. So I think that's still a kind of a huge thing, and I think more than just coming up with solutions there, I think it's about really energizing the industry to make change. I think someone that does that really well is Michael Beckerman at Cretech. He's passionate about solving this problem, and we need people who are going to kind of really challenge, but also kind of demonstrate the business case as well. So it's a bit of a rambling answer, but I think it is those big problems that face in the industry. ESG, I think it's not just being isolated tech solutions anymore. It's about understanding that this is a holistic thing, and tying in with other technologies.
No, I think you're bang on the money there. Michael Beckerman, we're huge fans of his. He's been a guest on the show. Again, he's one of the most inspiring people, really championing
For sure.
the whole wave of climate tech at the moment, and not only that, but actually the cultural shift that needs to go along with it. But you touched on something really important there, which is integration. And actually, this is the thing that I agree with you. I think there's a really good opportunity there for the companies who could do this well, because at the moment, everybody thinks their baby is the prettiest. Everybody thinks the problem they're solving is the most important problem, and everyone thinks their technology is the only way to address that problem. Whereas the reality is, what we've seen in the industry, again, this comes back to trust, where people have been using a provider for 20 years, they are not going to stop using that provider. So actually, if you want to improve on that, you need to be integrating.
Yes.
Don't come in, try to replace and dismiss what's gone before, because actually it's not about the technology. And one of the things, and frankly, it took me a couple of years to accept this, because I genuinely believe it's not the right thing, but it's just what happens. And that is, it is not the best solution that wins. It's not the best solution that gets purchased. It's the one we trust. It's the one we know. So actually, the biggest opportunity for innovators right now is to look at which older technologies are in place and how can we work with them. Because if you're going to go head to head and you're going to ask a real estate firm to change out their entire portfolio, you better be bringing good credibility. You better have the resources to do it. That's a huge ask. So yes, of course it can be done, but it's a big ask. where it's actually, I think that there's so many opportunities for integrations. And actually, we've seen this across things like safety lighting, where we've seen people come in and work with existing providers to offer a more high-tech solution, but they're not necessarily displacing the others, but again, integrating well. And actually, I think that this is part of the shift that has to happen, and there's a little bit of ego protection in this. Nobody wants to think they bought badly 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. So you have to give real estate and portfolio owners a way to not take a huge loss on technology mistakes that they might have bought in recent years. You know, you have to make it easier
Yeah.
for them.
I mean, I think the other interesting thing on that as well is it's not just potentially tying in with past solutions that are just like part of the fabric within a company. It's also thinking, if you're going into a portfolio or a building, it's about recognizing that things are going to change again. So actually making sure that your solution is integratable, you know, as other solutions come on board, that it's adaptable, that it's flexible, that it's not just solving a problem for 2022. You know, these things are going to keep evolving, keep shaping. That's what's fascinating to me. And so actually making sure that you can stay flexible and adaptable as a prop tech company is absolutely huge, and keep kind of iterating on things, keep kind of improving, keep listening to the buyer. You know, okay, what are the problems you're facing now? You know, everybody thought that we were still going to be going to the office 9 till 5, you know, 5 days a week. You know, it's COVID happened. You have to adapt. And so, you know, companies that have now changed to helping people work through hybrid working and all that sort of stuff, you've got to stay nimble. And I think that's accepting that things will keep evolving in the future, and you need to stay open to that as well.
Is it fair to say that COVID is probably the best thing that happened to prop tech in the last decade?
It's hard to position COVID as a positive, but yeah, I mean, in a business sense, yeah, look, I think we needed a shakeup, for sure. I think culturally we're ready for this as well. I just even think about generationally, if you look at the talent that's coming in, Gen Z, millennials, who are just so used to, you know, swipe left, swipe right. You know, they don't want to sit in a building for hours and hours and hours and hours. They want to have that kind of experiential change. They want to kind of keep things fresh. They want to, and you know, and so actually that presents challenges to the real estate industry. Putting them in a booth, you know, for 5 days a week, you know, across these hours, that's not going to cut it. And so actually, you know, understanding that this is where the market's going is really, really important. But yes, would that have happened naturally? Probably, but it would have taken a long, long time. I think the fact that everyone proved that they could work from home, and again, come back to that word trust, you know, that people could be trusted at home. But also, I think, you know, the other interesting side of this is, you know, people thought, well, is this the death of real estate? And absolutely not. There's still, you know, I think what's cool is that actually it's also proven the value of working in, you know, collaboration, you know, having community as well. So actually, you know, even this week, you know, I was like, I just need to go in and see our colleagues. You know, we're a remote first business, but actually for me to go in once or twice a week, I need that, because I need to bounce ideas off other people. So I think that's what's fascinating, is there's still a place for both. But yes, look, I think COVID's really challenged the industry in so many ways. I mean, we could have a whole nother discussion on that probably.
Yeah,
but
no, that's a very fair point. Before we finish up, PJ, what are you most excited about in PropTech?
Gosh, what am I most excited about in prop tech? I think I am most excited about, just the opportunities available to the industry. I think what's amazing is that there are just these almost like existential crises and massive social movements that are happening around us. You know, whether it is the environment, whether it is kind of, you know, the rising numbers of poor kind of mental health, whether it's adapting to hybrid working, whether it's looking at kind of transport infrastructure, all this stuff. There are so many challenges facing the built world. And what excites me is that, you know, technology holds the answer. I think if we're willing to kind of understand and listen to these problems, you know, well, and really understand the issues that the buyers are facing, I think technology holds the answer to all of those. So I think what's exciting is just seeing just the proliferation of providers coming up with amazing solutions, and seeing who becomes that sort of unicorn in 10 years time, and seeing how the industry evolves. So I just think the opportunities are immense. I think it's time to be positive. I think technology holds the answer. Yeah.
I love that technology. The answer, we just don't know what the question is yet.
That's true.
I love it. Okay, thank you so much. That was PJ Appleton, co-founder of Bloxspring. And that's it from us this week. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iPropertyRadio or by emailing hello@ipropertyradio.com. My thanks to producer Breed Malloy and the Hear Me Roar media production team, and to Luke Delaney on sound for Dublin South FM. Until next time, thank you for listening.